beyond 3D.
Another Saturday evening in and around the peninsula, as well as streaming live over the internet on RWP 98.7 and 98.3. Welcome to this week's Beyond 3D. Matt and Clint here, coming to you from Studio 2. Clint, it's been a wild week, hasn't it?
Hello, Matt. How are you?
I'm pretty good, actually.
It's great. It's been an interesting week. Where's Senior Orange at the moment? Just out of curiosity.
Bastille Day just happened in France, so that's where he would more than likely be jetting back from.
I knew he was in Europe.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
I heard he went to Poland.
He went to Poland and gave a lovely speech.
Okay.
He went to the G20.
Someone must have told him he was doing bad in the polls. So that's why he went there.
No, there were other reasons he needed to go there, to be perfectly honest with you, because what's going on back in Washington, D.C. and New York is even worse than anything that could be going on in Europe at this point in time. But I think that's what was going on with him. He wanted to see a parade of toys, so the French...
Go away.
The French complied with his wishes, and during Bastille Day celebrations, he got to see the jets roar over, and he got to see the tanks come down the street, just like he wanted at his inauguration, but they wouldn't let him do it.
I don't know what to say. I really don't know what to say. It won't be long.
No. Dick Gregory, the comic and activist, said about 3 weeks ago he gives him about 6 weeks.
You know him very well, don't you? You know Dick Gregory.
Dick Gregory is a very interesting guy, and some people think he's over the hills and far away, but most of his information is very accurate, and he has one of the biggest research facilities worldwide when it comes to researching both science, medical technologies, and what's going on politically. So it's somebody, if he says something like that's going on, my ears tend to perk up and notice.
What did you say he was? You didn't say he was...
He was a comic?
No. What kind of character did you say he was? Kind of a little bit...
Over the hills and far away.
Over the hills and far away. Usually when somebody is over the hills and far away, they're usually on the money.
Yeah. Well, I'd say he's pretty well damn straight on the money.
You have to be that eccentric to be tuned in that well.
And he's been around he's in his 80s now. He's been around for a very long time, and quite frankly, the information he puts out there, in my opinion, and the opinion of others, is quite accurate.
Dick Gregory.
And so you have to look at that and say, well, yes, big activist during the civil rights movement in the 60s, willing to die for his causes.
So what's he given Colt 45? What's he given Colt 45?
Because you'd be in jail.
Yeah, 45 Colt.
How long?
Oh, he said 6 weeks about 3 weeks ago.
Okay. So about another 3 weeks to go.
About another 3 weeks to go. Give it a month. And what's going on now in Washington around his junior son there, we'll see what comes of it.
Is Junior trying to outdo Senior in the dum-dum?
In the dum-dum area, maybe.
In the dum-dum Hunger Games?
Amazing. And even more information came out Friday night, last night about it, and it was very interesting. Now, there are even more people that were in that meeting in Trump Tower about this.
It didn't happen.
Oh, right, it didn't happen.
Fake news.
It didn't happen 2 months ago.
Fake news has just died, hasn't it? He can't say fake news anymore.
Oh, they'll still try.
But he can't, because every time he's come forward and said fake news, deny, and now everything's coming out.
Yep.
How can he ever go back to saying the word fake news again when what he's been saying is fake and lies?
Yeah, well, we all know that, but what they're saying... okay, I talked to a very good friend of mine in Washington, D.C. this week, and here is the way he and his extremely conservative friends describe it. We don't care what Donald Trump is doing. We want our agenda to go through.
Yeah, but let me play devil's advocate. If your agenda is XYZ, and the person that's in there can achieve that for you, who's to say that they're going to enhance your plans by being present? I would say, if anything, that they would cause more of a disservice.
Well, what's happening is this. They're very, very happy because they were able to stymie Barack Obama and his Supreme Court pick. They were able to put in what they consider to be a staunch Scalia-type conservative. They're happy with that. What they now want is they want to remove entitlements. What they want is they want to lower taxes for those making over a couple of $100,000 a year or more. That is all they care about. Everything else is inconsequential. If Donald Trump hangs himself, so be it.
He's hung himself plenty of times.
Is our agenda going to get through? That is what's going on behind the scenes. That is what they truly care about. Everything else, as far as ultra-conservatives are concerned, is pure theater.
I'm going to throw this in the works. Election,
Yep.
2020.
Right.
The Rock has thrown his hat in the ring, and it's official. He's registered now himself as a political candidate. He would win in a landslide just on the popular vote alone.
I don't think so.
Okay, I know what your opinion is on that, but he is a bigger film star today than what Ronald Reagan was back in the 80s.
But Ronald Reagan was governor of California, therefore he has political backing. He actually went through legislating.
It's The Rock, Matt, though. His popularity and his can-do attitude would swing many, many Democrats and conservatives and Republicans towards what it is that he brings to the table, that assurity and that
They will have to have
business.
a really good promotional department around him. He's going to have to study up. He's going to have to put out where he believes he can take the country and guide the country. I do not, under any way, shape, or form believe that he could win the presidency of the United States.
President Johnson.
It's not going to happen.
Can you smell what The Rock is cooking?
Not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
It can't get any weirder. That's the thing. Or can it?
Oh, of course it will get weirder, but I don't think that's the pertinent issue. The pertinent issue is the fact that ultra-conservatives have gotten the first thing they wanted. There are a couple of other things they want in the pipeline coming through legislation. If they get those, they don't care. They don't care.
I'm just writing. I'm just writing stuff down. Now, I saw an interesting thing this week
Yes.
on AI.
Artificial intelligence.
Creating fake human beings so realistic it's almost impossible to pick them. Now, I've always had this theory that it doesn't matter what is visually recorded or audio recorded and kept for the ages, it can still be used and doctored for nefarious reasons. Anything in the digital age, most things in the digital age now cannot be verified because of the way that pixels can be manipulated and the way that audio can be chopped up and moved around. This week just gone, AI created a fake Obama.
Yep.
Almost impossible to pick the difference between the two.
We can put the pictures up on the Facebook page.
Yeah, I can do that. Just give me a second, I'll put it on
whack
there.
it up.
But computer scientists at the University of Washington previously revealed that they generated a digital doppelganger of Obama using images collected from the internet and audio collected from YouTube and speeches and that kind of
All that
captured
kind of stuff, yeah.
Yep, all that kind of stuff. And the researchers chose Obama for their latest work because there were hours of high-definition video of him available online in the public domain. And the research team had a neural net analyze millions of frames of video to determine how elements of Obama's face moved as he talked, such as his lips and his teeth and the wrinkles around his mouth and chin. Now, when they could do that these days to the point where it's flawless and almost impossible to pick with the human eye, I don't trust anything in the digital age anymore.
Well, if you can do that and you have a situation where you can remove a person, let's say assassinate somebody, you could have a doppelganger in there that's digitally created.
Absolutely.
That can still make it seem like that person is alive and well and kicking and giving orders.
Real eyes, real lies.
Exactly. Now, once again, you said something, digital. and we're sitting here in an analog studio.
It's not really analog. It is semi-digital.
No, well, Studio 3 next door to us, that is a full suite that is analog.
Well, hang on a
all the
minute.
way
Everything
through.
here on Zara is digital.
Yeah, but
Is behind you.
yeah. So, as far as I'm concerned, I've always had this argument. Audiophiles have this argument a lot between analog and digital. And most people, well, we'll put it this way. Now everything I just said to you earlier, now in the cars, you don't even have a CD player anymore. Everything is now USB.
Correct.
Or Bluetooth, and you can hook a phone up and you can
Yep.
play music and do whatever you want in your car.
Correct.
So now, being that that is the case, why is it that most audiophiles can't stand the digital format and will go analog the entire way? There's a reason.
Well, enlighten me, because we're about to go for a break.
Fair enough. The reason is very simple. You get a pure sound
Of course you do.
from the analog signal than you could ever get from digital, which is the
Same as you do with vinyl.
Absolutely. And that's why today, if you go out and spend anywhere up to $50,000 on a turntable, it will still give you a purer sound than any CD, any DVD, any USB flash drive, MP3 kind of situation could ever give you when it comes to music.
We're going to take a break.
Indeed.
Beyond
3D.
Saturday evenings, welcome back to Beyond 3D. Matt and Clint here with you. Clint, big story this week, the Antarctic.
When is that not a big story?
Yeah, so, well, this is
And
more,
it's going to get bigger,
it'll
too.
get bigger. I'll have my reasons for this, but a 1 trillion ton iceberg is now adrift.
The Antarctic story needs no Viagra.
And they're calling it Larsen C, and it has finally broken off from, lack of a better term, the nest, and is free floating in the northwestern Antarctic. And everyone is talking about this because the size of this free floating iceberg is quite spectacular. And so we'll have a few things to compare it to.
I heard it was twice the size of Tasmania or Texas. It was one of those two.
Okay, I'll go over a few of them, and that way people
It
will
began
get
with
an
a
idea.
T.
Yeah, well, let's see if it's in here. First of all, twice the size of Luxembourg in Europe.
Okay.
4 times the size of Greater London.
Okay.
A quarter of the size of Wales.
Okay.
It would be the equivalent of 1,700 Central Parks in New York City.
Okay. Now I know how big that is visually.
The same size as 50 Dublin Irelands.
Wow. It's a big chunk of water, isn't it?
2.3 Moscows. And for all of you whack jobs that love that sport called soccer out there, 812,325 soccer pitches.
Now when that melts, and it will melt,
Ultimately.
when it hits a heavily salted patch of water, I would say it would start the melting process. I think with large ice shelves that size, it has to stay connected to the greater mass to keep its form. Once it starts drifting away from that greater mass and that temperature zone, then the melting occurs. So it doesn't mean that the tide at your local beach is going to increase by a meter overnight, but it will add to the weather, the horrible weather that's going on around the world at the moment.
Ultimately. Because as it melts and it starts to warm up, it will add itself to the other water masses out there in the Pacific Ocean. And that will work its way to the north, and it will work its way through the stream, and it will work its way through El Nino and La Nino and all that malarkey. And it will add to the storm content, it will add to the snow content in the northern hemisphere going from the United States across into Europe. So yeah, it will ultimately work its way through the system and will have an effect.
I just looked that up and found out how much it weighs. 1 trillion tons of water.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of ice.
It's quite a bit. Large size, and it's broken free. But here's the other thing that I thought was very interesting when I heard this had finally broken. They said there was the last few kilometers breaking off. It took a long time. And that's years by a long time. Now, the thing that I thought was interesting was And what came to me was the fact that the Antarctic is starting to reveal itself.
Nature's starting to reveal it.
Or reveal it, yeah.
Reveal it,
yeah.
Yep.
So what they will find is going to be very interesting.
This is what I don't understand. If you take 1 trillion tons of water and shift it from a position on the Earth, which is at the bottom of its axis, does that affect the rotation at all?
You'd have to think about that.
Well, hang on. The weight's just moving to another location, though.
But it's not all happening
where it came from.
No, but it's not all happening even at once. There's a process that has to happen. So it's a solid mass that is broken free. There's still, as you said, is the melting process. That will take time.
But maybe this is the Earth's way of counter-correcting the problems that it has by busting off a 1 trillion ton chunk of water and sending it somewhere else in the world to counterbalance.
Well, if you look at Fukushima and what's going on there, maybe what it's doing is it's going to send fresh water or water up into the Pacific to try to cleanse itself.
Nobody's looking at Fukushima. It's not happening.
Well, fair enough, but still, that I think is a very valid point. There are ways Mother Earth will purge herself, and this could be one of those ways. Now, over the next month, there will be people that will say this was, man helped this along by doing this and doing that, but I'm not too worried about that aspect of it.
Al Gore might start using it. He's traveling around the world at the moment.
Oh, Lord.
Belting out his next movie.
Here we go. Mr. Gore. Well, I think it's very interesting, but I'm more interested in what this is going to start to reveal that is in the Antarctic, because I'm of the mind that, yes, it's a pole, so to speak, but there's a difference. The North Pole is not a continent.
No.
South Pole and Antarctica is a continent. Therefore, it is a land mass as opposed to just ice. Therefore, there's something underneath that ice, and that is starting to be revealed. And so, when you go back to the 1700s and the fact that they had mapped out the entire coastline of the Antarctic, and this map is available today, when you start to see the fact that there were travelers down there during those times, we have to say, well, what was there? What civilizations could have been down there? And that's, I think, what is going to start to be revealed.
1513. The Piri Reis map.
Okay, yep.
That documented the Antarctic coastline and the continent of Antarctica, and yet nobody understands how that was possible.
I want to know who froze it.
Yeah, there's the crickets again. You got me thinking.
It's frozen, yes, but
look,
why?
All evidence has come out that it once was lush and green.
Exactly.
And they're still finding lots of lush and green, snap frozen under ice, that's just sitting there, and there are plenty of subterranean ecosystems that are lush and green and bioluminescent light sources down below under Antarctica. All that's come out recently.
Yes. Even Doc Ram was talking about the bioluminescence.
Doc Ram was talking about the bioluminescence.
So this is, in my opinion, it'll be revealed. They're going to try to slow it down a little bit, but ultimately it's going to be revealed, and we will find out exactly what was. Well, we'll be drip-fed exactly what was down in Antarctica, but we will find out ultimately. So that was one of the things I was looking at this week in amazement. The other thing that I saw this week that was interesting was something that we've talked about this before, but I thought it was very interesting that how do I put this? The eugenics-based racist Georgia Guidestones had gone missing.
Yes. Yes. Oh boy, we really need to take a break.
Fair enough. We'll deal with them when we get back.
Beyond 3D.
Welcome back this week to another edition of Beyond 3D. Matthew, you were just talking about the Georgia Guidestones.
Disappeared from their Georgia home, but they've reappeared.
Beg your pardon? Where did they come back? That's the interesting. Now, if anybody doesn't know what the Georgia Guidestones are...
Let's start there first. The Georgia Guidestones, created in the 70s? what they talked about, it was almost like a Stonehenge kind of situation. And the thing that the town in Georgia where these were placed was a very small town, a population of about 5,500 people.
Albert County.
Okay, now the main main employment of the men of this town, they were stonemasons. A lot of them. So that was something that was in the area, and a lot of them were also known to be Freemasons, so they were in the Masonic lodges.
I was going to say there's 5 slabs.
Yeah.
So they're sort of standing up end to end, and there's a slab on top.
Slab on top, yeah.
And the language is Babylonian, Classical Greek, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphics, as well as English. Why have all those different ancient languages saying the same message on the Georgia Guidestones?
Quite frankly, I believe that in reading about them and in researching them a little bit, not a lot, a little bit, it is a eugenics-based program.
I've got the 10...
Okay, yeah,
I've got the 10 guideline principles.
Go through them.
Number 1, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature.
Okay, so there's 7.5 billion or so now, and they want to maintain the population under 500 million.
That's it.
Therefore...
in balance with nature.
Okay, then let's look at this as a scientific situation. Did they build these so that they may be able to survive an apocalyptic event?
Possibly, because of the size.
Because of the size?
Number 2, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity.
Eugenics.
Improving fitness and diversity. So how could you guide reproduction and improve fitness?
Genetic engineering.
Genetic engineering.
Yeah.
Number 3, unite humanity with a living new language.
What, not that Esperanza thing?
Explain that. What's
that was one of those languages like the UN came up with, that was everybody could learn one common language. But you almost had a situation that you had one common language, but the Catholic Church declared that language known as Latin dead.
Yeah, why? Yeah, why though? Oh, no, hang on. That was a silly question, wasn't it? Saturday evenings, isn't it?
That's the way.
Saturday's been a long day today. Yeah, they would have killed that so that they could have their own little secret language.
You got it.
Thank you.
You got it. Anyway, number 4.
Number 4. Oh my God. Number 4. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason.
Tempered reason. Rhetoric. The Hegelian dialectic and all that kind of stuff.
What was the first word I used?
Rule.
Thank you. Rule. No freedom, rule. Number 5. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. That's the basis of any modern civilization, isn't it? Number 6, let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court.
A world court.
Well, if you had a world court, that comes back to a new world order, doesn't it?
Yeah, basically.
So back to eugenics again and control. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. I like that. Let's cut out the middleman. Balance personal rights. Number 8, balance personal rights with social duties. Number 9.
Yep.
Prize. I can't say this without laughing. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Number 10. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. Twice. Well, so prize truth, beauty, and love, seeking harmony with the infinite, in my opinion, means they're going to be the judges of truth, beauty, and love. And if it is not harmonious, what happens? Oh, there'd be a revolt, to say the least. And be not a cancer on the earth, leave room for nature, and then to say it again, leave room for nature, huh? 19 feet tall. Okay, yeah. Well, 107,000 kilos. How did they shift it, Matt? I don't know how they shifted, but I do know where. Where did it go? Where did it go? It is now in a state whose motto is live free or die, known as New Hampshire. How did it go from a Masonic state to a free state like that? Did somebody move it as a joke? Does anybody know?
At this point, it's still a mystery.
Okay.
But the mystery hopefully will be revealed. I think what they're trying to do is to actually find out who was behind the guide stones to begin with. You can tie it into a lot of different things. As I said, it was built in the 70s. There was a person by the name of R.C. Christian that was said to be the architect of the stones, but that is in dispute. As I said before, the town was very small and was full of stonemasons and Freemasons. Most of those 10 tenants, for lack of a better term, that you read, in my opinion, are a bunch of hooey. And yeah, when you look at the people who are around it, when you look at the people who are said to have made it, when you look at the tenants on it, it leads to things like the old Alice Bailey books and the Theosophical Society. Mm-hmm. It leads to Madame Blavatsky and all of her Russian devil-worshipping friends.
Okay, well, we're starting to head down the path of Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, kind of, sort of, that as well. And some of the people around the alleged people who were responsible for this, and the fact of the matter is they also have gotten letters from the Smithsonian Institution, so you have that entity involved in this as well. A lot of them are white supremacist, racist, eugenicist, and are looking to cull anything that does not meet the Northern European way. And so when I heard that they had disappeared, I was like, good riddance, goodbye. But then they turned up again, and they turned up in Derry, New Hampshire.
That's somebody's done that intentionally and dropped it off in that location for a specific reason. That location was not chosen random.
No, I don't think it was chosen at random, but
I wonder if it's on any kind of ley lines.
Have to see. You'd have to look up where it is now, get the coordinates for it, and see what the heck is going on.
This is the bit that I don't understand. Mm-hmm. If we wanted to erect a monument that size in our town, you'd need permits. Mm-hmm. You would need the street cut off to bring the truck in to ship this with a crane. Somebody has to sign off on these things. Somebody has to sign off on these permits. Somebody has to sign off on the creation of this stuff and submit it to the local authorities. This monument is so friggin' huge, you can't just build this and just whack it up anywhere.
No. And so this was well planned, well thought out. And it says here, I'll read the part of an article here. It's basically talking about the Derry authorities up in New Hampshire are trying to figure out what to do about the guide stones since they are taking up valuable park space. Local investigators have reached out to Elbert County government officials for guidance on what to do with them. These things weigh tons, the chief of police said. We called the fire department to see what they could do. They couldn't do anything. We even had some heavy equipment out here this afternoon, but these stones were too heavy to move. When I talked to the sheriff in Elbert County, he just laughed and said, well, maybe they'll just find their way back to Georgia eventually. They have equipment, and that it's not good enough to be able to move these things. So how in the heck did you move these things from the southern United States to the tip-top northern United States?
In one night.
Overnight or whatever. I don't know how long
it has to be overnight.
How do you do that?
I'm looking at these Georgia guide stones. Mm-hmm. So they're 19 feet above ground. How big are they below?
No clue.
They must be embedded into the ground to stop them from tipping over.
The other thing is, who knows? The whole thing can be trying to build up publicity around the whole thing, and it's not true. We'll have to do a lot of research on it. You never know. This is the thing. So I think what we'd have to do is maybe look at Google Earth and see whether or not we can find the coordinates of where they were in Georgia and see what's going on. Maybe somebody just made a copy of them or something like that and moved those. I have no idea. Maybe there was a second set. Who knows? But it's interesting that this has come up now because of the message that they tried to deliver over the years. And to have something like that removed all of a sudden, what does it mean? Do they think something is about to happen? And they had to remove it to a place of safety so that it would be... it would remain in case something were to happen down in that area?
Watch this space.
Watch the space and we'll find out what it's all about.
Beyond 3D.
Saturday evening, back with you guys on Beyond 3D. More stories, an article from a website that I see here called LiveScience.com.
Hang on a sec. Do you know what this sound is? You'd know what that sound was, wouldn't you?
Yep. If you're a Star Trek fan, you would.
Okay.
No problem. Teleportation. Beaming.
Beaming.
As in beam me to the planet. As in energize. The Chinese scientists.
Now, before you go any further with this story,
Okay.
a while ago, a couple of years back, I'm pretty sure they ran a story. Was it them or Korea? Somebody either China or Korea ran a story that they'd landed on the sun. So
Sounds Korea-like.
So while you tell this story, I'm going to hunt.
Okay.
I'm going to hunt.
Okay.
Go for it.
The Chinese scientists have just set the record for the farthest quantum teleportation. And so what we're talking about here is they have just shattered a record in teleportation. They haven't beamed anyone to a spaceship, rather they sent a packet of information from Tibet to a satellite in orbit up to 870 miles, 1,400 kilometers above the Earth's surface, more specifically.
How far did you say?
870 miles.
Okay, so 1,400 kilometers.
Yeah.
Okay.
More specifically, the scientists beamed the quantum state of a photon, information about how it is polarized into orbit.
I was going to say a photon.
Yeah. Not only did the team set a record for quantum teleportation distance, they also showed that one can build a practical system for long-distance quantum communications. Such a communication system would be impossible to eavesdrop on without alerting the users, which would make online communications much more secure. Now, experiments like this have been done before, but Howard Wiseman, director of the Center of Senior Quantum Dynamics at Griffith University in Brisbane, here in Australia, told Live Science in an email that this one expands the possibilities for the technology. This is much more difficult because it is to a rapidly moving target, and you have your quantum detectors way out in space, where they have to work without anyone fiddling with them, he said. It's a big step towards global-scale quantum communication.
Okay.
So they are...
It's impressive. It's impressive. Simply put, teleportation is transmitting the state of a thing rather than sending the thing itself.
Right.
So some physicists give the example of a fax machine. It sends the information about the marks on a piece of paper rather than the piece of paper itself.
Right.
The receiving fax machine gets the information, applies it to the raw material in the form of paper that is already there. Now, question.
Yes.
When you do that with a fax, technically you have one copy, and by the time you've gone through the process, you have a second. How do they use that as an example with teleportation? Because you don't want a second copy of yourself, do you? So how does that...
That would be cloning.
That's cloning.
So yeah, it's an interesting little scenario there. But they're working on it. That's the whole thing. It's a work in progress. I think that's the main thing. But the information has been sent, and
that was
they
quantum
will continue.
entanglement.
Quantum.
Entanglement. Okay.
So that I thought was a very interesting little story. Now there's another story out, and I'm going to have to do a little more research on this in the coming weeks on one of your favorite topics.
Oh, I got plenty. Where are we going with this one?
Starts with the letter C. It's in Switzerland.
Oh, CERN. I've stopped trying to be concerned about CERN.
Yeah, well, I was reading this week, there was a story that came out about they're now trying to build the next biggest thing. I'll have to do a little more research on it and find it, but I thought it was quite interesting what they were stating. And I think there's an American show, Charlie Rose, and he was interviewing a scientist from Harvard University, and they were actually starting to talk about CERN and what is going on as far as Hadron Colliders and what it creates and the different universes that could be opened up. And I thought of you immediately going, interesting, but I looked at them, and the first thing that came to my mind when I saw it was children. They don't get the fact that unless they want to, and it's even an insult to a child. At least a child has imagination. These guys in science want to basically just say, if I can't prove it using this machine and this machine under these conditions, it doesn't exist. And I've always had a big problem with that. But that is what I I was looking at, and I'll put it up on the Facebook page, the little interview. It goes for a couple of minutes, and people can look at it themselves. But I really thought that for people that are supposedly in the upper echelon of education, they were being quite childish in their views when it comes to what could be created or what is out there, or the fact that, well, the way the host described it was he stated, well, I can understand, 3 dimensions. We call the show Beyond 3D. So if the fourth dimension is time. He said he couldn't.
Everything else that goes with it.
Yes, but then he said, but I have a very hard time fathoming what is beyond even that. And
okay, that's because your thinking is confined only to a 3D environment. When you're thinking about the fourth dimension, you're using your imagination only, because you physically can't be in the fourth dimension in this reality. True? So if you're pondering on the fourth dimension, you're only doing it inside your head, where everything's processed.
But that's the time component.
I know, but when you're talking fifth dimension, sixth dimension, you're talking sacred geometry.
Yes, but they don't want to
and sound and it's
that.
Everything. It's a cacophony of everything.
They are all interconnected.
Well, the future's the past and the present.
Well, this is the thing. You're talking about interconnectedness, and so we have a physical form, but we have an etheric form that powers it up, and then we have an astral emotional form that powers through the other two. Then we have a mental form and a causal form. You have a whole lot of different forms that allow this physical form to operate in this light spectrum right now. You need all of them in order to be able to manifest here. These guys
Just giving you a nice golf clap, Matt. You worded that perfectly.
These guys don't do that. They stop. They don't acknowledge. And so now all of a sudden they're coming out saying, well, maybe we're going to have to acknowledge it.
They have to acknowledge it because their scientific models do not go any further. They're limited. Their scientific models and their formulas can only take them so far.
So what Charlie Rose said to this woman was, well, basically what you're saying is you have to start thinking outside of your box in order to really see what's going on out there. I digress. Big one, but it was a digression.
No, I liked it.
CERN.
Oh,
they are building the next level, and it is supposed to be 10 times bigger. And
10 times bigger problems, too.
Yeah, exactly. So it will be very interesting. I will look it up because I was looking at it before, and I will get into it because you'll find it interesting, the fact that they are now looking to expand even more.
This is what bothers me. Okay? This is what bothers me about CERN. What was the first, do you remember what it was first created for?
Colliding, what do you calls together?
Particles.
Yeah.
To find the God particle.
The Higgs boson.
The Higgs boson.
Yeah.
And they did that quite quickly. Okay. What else, Matt, have they done that has been newsworthy for the rest of the world? Is there anything that comes to mind at all? No, I'm serious when I ask you that question.
I don't know. What do you... Just go for it, because I honestly...
No, well, what I'm saying
my
is...
My mind is not connecting on it right now.
No, your mind doesn't need to connect on it, because there's nothing to connect. Okay, what I'm saying to you is, it costs billions and billions of dollars to build CERN.
Right.
And you're telling me now, which I already knew, but our listeners might not have, but you're telling all of us now that they're going to build a big one. Question is why? Okay, if you've built a facility to find the Higgs boson particle, and you've done a lot of other things, in inverted commas, that hasn't been released to the mainstream,
right?
And all of a sudden, you're announcing to the world you want to build an even bigger one, who's paying for that? For them to raise the capital to build a bigger one, there must be something amazingly significant that they have discovered and found with the original CERN that they can bring to the investors and say, this is what we've discovered, this is what our discovery can do, we want to extrapolate on that more, cash us up, and we'll build an even bigger one. And we'll open that doorway, we'll open that Stargate to wherever you want to go with this new technology.
All right, now I know where you're going with this, but this is the thing.
Hang on, Matt. We've got to take a break.
Fair enough.
Beyond 3,
D.
Welcome back to Beyond 3D. Tonight we're talking about CERN. And Matthew, you just happened to bring it up tonight. It wasn't a
No.
It wasn't something that was
had nothing
planned.
to do. No, it just popped into the head. The scientist that I was talking about is a Dr. Lisa Randall, and quite frankly, what you mentioned about Stargates, I think, is very pertinent to this discussion, because if you spend billions upon billions of dollars building something like that, and there are residual effects to what you have done, what you're going to find is that, I believe, they have found that there are other Earth-like worlds through those so-called Stargates.
They've been drip feeding that
with
information.
human beings just like you will find here, only at different levels of awareness.
But they've been drip feeding that for years and years now. That
But I think they
other
now-
realities exist right here with our reality.
But I think they now can prove it, but they just don't want that information released.
Thank you. Thank you. How else would they raise the capital? And we're talking billions and billions of dollars. How else would they raise that capital unless they had significant data from the original CERN?
Well, I think that's what's really going on with that, and it's going to lead to some astounding revelations for some people. when
Not
you
for another
find
10
out-
years, though.
No, but when you find out that you're not the only thing in the galaxy, let alone the universe, in this galaxy, when you find out you're one of billions, and you really, and you're on the low end of the totem pole, so to speak, it will be a wake-up call for a lot of people who all of a sudden realize that they aren't as, well, it'll be a blow to a lot of egos.
The alternative scientific community has documented everything from scientists at CERN disappearing to things coming out of what it is that they open. So I'm a little bit concerned about CERN, and I'm always concerned about CERN. I don't believe it ever has the best interests of humanity at its core.
Gotcha.
When they have to have demonic opening ceremonies to launch the thing.
Yeah, that was pretty pathetic.
Where does all that come from?
There are some people in there that are planning these things. Just like with those guide stones, the fact that the numbers 333 and 666 come up all over the daggone place. These things are being planned for a specific purpose. But with the whole scientific community, they're trying to find a way to justify... Well, actually what they're doing is what most businesses did back during the tech wreck. They were complaining that all these companies that were coming out and listing on the stock exchange and going for... and making people billionaires, all they were was an office with a computer server in it, and all they were doing was going out and collecting data and making mailing lists up, and that was their entire business. And then they were going to other businesses, and they were saying, well, here's our list of 100,000 people. If you'll give all of our people a 10% discount on your product, we can direct them to you. They were poo-pooed, they were belittled, they were berated, they were told that their companies were nothing, and ultimately these companies all went down. But in the background, what was happening was the companies that were considered, let's say, Dow Jones 30, the top companies were positioning themselves so they could do the exact same thing. And so now today, the company that was described that way back then is Google. Google is a building with a whole bunch of servers in it, and they collect data and information, and that information is shared amongst their people, and they now go to other companies and saying, we have these billion plus people here that can look at something, how much do you want to pay us to do this, that, or the other? So what they did was, they didn't want new money involved in it, they wanted the old money to get involved in it, so they just waited and set themselves up in the position where they could take advantage of the technologies and everything like that. Science will do the same thing. They now know that this solar system is populated. They're never going to release that information until they're in the position of advantage and they can control what the masses think.
The NSA and the CIA collectively contributed to the creation of Google. It is the world's #1 profiling app that profiles you. You go into Google and want to look up your favorite musician or how to make this particular food dish. All you're doing is providing information to the NSA about what you're into, what your skills are, where you go, what you do.
Right. And Facebook helps as well.
And Facebook helps as well. It's
Twitter,
all, you know,
Snapchat, Instagram, all of them.
you look at it to think it's entertainment, but you really just, all you're doing is just sharing your personal information, which then gets on-sold to those companies that you were talking about.
Absolutely. But, oh well, that is the way the world works these days. But watch this space, because, quite frankly, I think a lot of people on this Earth are going to be shocked when they find out what is really going on out there in the galaxy.
And you were talking about CERN with numbers like 333 and 666999. 666999 is part of the CERN logo. So, no coincidence with that kind of stuff.
Not at all. It's planned that way. It is definitely planned that way.
Beyond 333.
You know, many of us have been down this road before, and we know where it goes. There are researchers who have excellent information on what CERN is really all about. The problem is, when you start talking about opening portals and demons and the awakening of Osiris or Nimrod or the Antichrist, people are going to want to know, how do you know these things if it is not as apparent to them as it is to you? So for those people who don't really believe in those things, the only concern should be if the events, the experiments conducted at CERN, are dangerous or not. You see, CERN knows that the most common concern among the public is that they may open up some black hole that sucks us all in or destroys the Earth. So they have taken measures to assure all of us that their experiments are perfectly safe. They are producing cosmic rays in our planet, and do you know what they have to say about the safety of this? Their reasoning is that black holes and cosmic rays are all a part of nature, and because nothing has happened to the sun and the Earth, hey, why not recreate what happens in space here on Earth? Better yet, in the Earth. Yes, they actually state this on their website. You want to really know what's going on at CERN? Go to their website. Go to their YouTube channel if you didn't know they had one. Understand that this place is not just a laboratory. It is an institute, a school. They are constantly on the lookout for fresh young minds that qualify to conduct experiments there themselves. But not only is this place a giant institution, it is indeed something much more. I'm going to do something. And that is, I'm going to give you a larger view of what CERN is. So one of the ways to understanding what CERN is today is by understanding what CERN used to be. At the end of World War II, a small group of scientists from France, Italy, and Denmark proposed the idea of creating a European physics laboratory to unite European scientists and share the increasing costs of research in nuclear physics. This idea was presented at the 5th UNESCO General Conference in Florence, Italy in 1950. And after the intergovernmental meeting of UNESCO in Paris of 1951, 11 countries signed an agreement to establish the European Council for Nuclear Research, or CERN. In 1952, the Council made provisions to build this laboratory in Geneva, Switzerland, part of which would be on the site that some believe stood the Temple of Apollyon, St. Guinness Pauli. In 1954, they began digging at the Muon, Switzerland site. And the very first particle accelerator built there was a 600 million electron volt synchro cyclotron in 1957. This machine was used to focus more on nuclear physics, while the newer model, the Proton synchrotron in 1959, would handle the particle physics, which could produce beams of energy of 28 billion electron volts, a world record. The proton synchrotron's job from that point on would be to supply particles to newer machines. Now, they already knew that there were antiparticles, and they would make their first observations of this in 1965. If you look carefully, you will find that CERN always knows something exists before they actually find it and observe it. So, in 65, they exposed the Antineutron, a nucleus of antimatter composed of a antiproton and antineutron, which was observed using the proton synchrotron. The problem with this was that the detection process involved looking at millions of photographs taken from a bubble chamber or spark chamber, which was very inefficient. But Gilles Charpak took care of this by developing a multi-wire detector connected to a computer, to later become the common detectors used in almost every experiment at CERN today. At the same time this is happening, they came up with the idea of using the proton synchrotron to supply two interconnected rings, 7 kilometers in length, where they could take the proton beams, build them up, and smash them together. Interestingly enough, this was also the first time a touchscreen was used on a computer. Now, the first of these rings was turned on in 1976. The Super Proton Synchrotron. Sorry, folks, but you gotta say that with a deep voice. This thing operates at 450 billion electron volts. You see how the number keeps jumping up? And despite the power of the SPS, they still needed more energy. They needed more speed. They needed a bigger ring. And they got it in 1988 with the completion of the tunnel for their Large Electron Positron Collider. 2 years later, in 1990, Tim Berners-Lee would write the first browser and server software running on a NeXT or NeXT computer at CERN, and gave birth to the World Wide Web. In fact, they still have this computer on exhibit there. Now in 1997, they decided that they would approve 3 new experiments to the Large Electron Positron Collider: CMS, Atlas, and Alice. Pay attention to the names because they are important. The following year, in 1998, they approved the LHC-B experiment in preparation for the Large Hadron Collider. And on November 2nd, 2000, the Large Electron Positron Collider was shut down so that it could be rebuilt to become the LHC. In 2004, CERN celebrated its 50th anniversary. At this point, they've been smashing particles for over 30 years. And they celebrated their 50th anniversary with the inauguration of the Wooden Globe of Science and Innovation, a gift of the Swiss Confederation. 4 years later, in 2008, after the completion of the Large Hadron Collider, a 27-kilometer double-ring accelerator, they fired it up for the first time, starting at around 4 trillion electron volts, sending protons through a chain of high-powered magnets with a force stronger than the Earth's gravity, at a speed just under the speed of light, and smashed them head-on at 4 different points along the collider, producing massive amounts of energy. Later, in 2011, CERN had become very successful in the study of antimatter by trapping it. In fact, using the Alpha experiment, they were able to make and trap antihydrogen for 16 minutes, giving them plenty of time for study. In 2012, Atlas and CMS, which is short for Compact Muon Solenoid, or Big Freaking Magnet, would observe the Higgs boson particle, another particle that they somehow already knew was there. You see, these discoveries grant them further ability to keep going, and to keep going bigger, faster, and stronger, to become what CERN is today. Everything that I have discussed up to this point comes from CERN's very own website. This place is very compartmentalized. All the scientists work in separate departments in separate buildings. Many of them don't even know each other, or what they even do in other departments. CERN even has a section on their website where they answer queries from social media about all the conspiracy theory type questions many of us have been asking. They, of course, deny everything. This is a gigantic facility with over 2,200 staff members, not to mention the 10,000 plus people who are on the site at any one time. A lot of these people are students, subcontractors, visiting scientists. This is a scientist's paradise. The technologies used at CERN are no less than amazing. So you have to ask yourself, why would people believe that CERN is doing something evil? I'll tell you why. Because CERN puts it out there. They are the ones talking about smashing particles together. They are the ones talking about making black holes. They are the ones talking about other dimensions. They let India put a statue of Shiva out front, and people are having rituals in front of the thing in the middle of the night. They passed themselves off as so squeaky clean, but then they turned around and did something incredibly stupid. On April 1st of 2017, the head of media relations and spokesperson for CERN, Arnaud Marsollier, wrote an article and published it on CERN's website entitled Ancient Particle Accelerator Discovered on Mars. Yes, they did. Basically pointing out that Olympus Mons on Mars, which NASA says is a volcano, is not a volcano, but a massive ancient particle accelerator 2,000 kilometers in circumference, about 75 times larger than the LHC. And the pyramids of Giza may have acted as a giant antenna with a control room underneath it to run the Mars accelerator by remote control. This is what he wrote. He literally called it a Stargate. What's strange about this is that I think this guy was not lying. Do you know why I think that? Because when you look at Olympus Mons and the 3 other large volcanoes in that area that are somehow equidistantly lined up with each other, you can see that they line up in a way that is exactly the same way the pyramids line up, exactly the same way Orion's belt lines up, and exactly the same way the detectors line up on the LHC at CERN. Is that coincidence? Is it also coincidence that there is this common 2-to-1 ratio with the names of these structures? You have 2 names with the same first letter on the 2 larger structures, and the 3rd smaller structure has a name that is the odd one of the 3. Alnatak, Alnalam, and Mintaka. Ascrius, Arcia, and Pavonis. Khufu, Khafre, and Minkare. And at CERN, we have Alice, Atlas, and LHCb.
Beyond 3D.
Welcome back tonight to Beyond 3D. Matt, there was some pertinent information there.
Oh, look, there's a lot going on right now, and it's going to get even more intense in the next 6 months. So what we're going to do is keep pumping out the information to you guys, staying a little bit ahead of the curve, and so that way you're prepared. I think that's the most important thing.
We usually do that most weeks anyway.
Yeah. We're going to have to make sure, we're going to have to bunker down and really make sure you guys are prepared, because there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to come out that's going to shake the foundations of a lot of Western society dogma.
I posted something on Facebook the other day that was about the giants that were discovered in China.
Yep.
And I went, well done, mainstream dinosaur news. You're only about 6 to 12 months behind Beyond 3D.
Yeah, that's what it is. And it'll always be that way, because they need to make sure that it comes out at specific times. So when something's going wacky in Washington, they'll put out a story to try to divert attention from what's going on that's wacky in Washington. So what's going on wacky in France, what's going on in the fact that, ISIS is supposedly out of Mosul, but now the guy that's moving in, the Iraqi president, is stealing all their Toyota trucks and stuff like that. It's kind of stupid. Petty, ridiculous, but this is the world we're currently living in. It's going to get better, but it'll get worse before it gets better. But the good thing...
Congratulate me.
For?
I haven't broken a pen tonight.
Oh, very nice. The good thing about it is, and this is the one positive thing we can say about Senior Orange, he has been a catalyst.
Yep.
That has brought out a lot of skeletons from a lot of closets.
He was the necessary
The necessary evil.
The necessary evil.
And it is exposing a lot of closeted bigots and closeted racists and all kinds of religious fanatics for what they truly are, so he's been a catalyst.
And he's been entertaining too, in the most stupid of ways.
To an extent.
To an extent. And that's all we have time for this week, Matt.
Take good care of yourself, guys, out there. We'll catch you next week with another edition of Beyond 3D.
Good night, everybody.
Take care.
Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.